I'm your favorite magic channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck text. I come correct like a porn star, slicing up all these other suckers with my sword Mars.
What's up, my wizards dev? SBMTG down there. We do magic stuff on YouTube, namely decks. Here's the thing, for instance. I'm going to bring you a deck today that I haven't talked about like at all, because sometimes I like to spring decks on you to keep it fresh. I mean, it wouldn't be any fun if you always knew what was coming next. So today, we're going to do something kind of cool. I think a few people are going to get a kick out of this. We're going to show you how to build blue-black control on a budget. Control's a really fun archetype for a lot of players, you know. Dictate the pace of the game, don't let you have that, ask permission before you play spells, get that thing out of your hand, kill your creatures and play a huge threat that you have to deal with, but you can't, because I've just completely destroyed all your resources. That's fun, control is fun, but price point is not usually very accessible. In this standard right now, you gotta play all these crazy lands, you gotta play Dragon Lord Ojutai, you might play Kalidas, he's like $1 million, like 30 bucks. Ojutai's 15, these lands are expensive. You might want to play the Planeswalker Jace, he's expensive. Omnixilis is a Planeswalker, he's expensive. Jace Vryn's Prodigy, don't even want to talk about him, he's like $75. So control is crazy. It's fairly expensive to build a very high power control deck in this format. But that being said, I do think it's entirely possible to take a lot of the pieces that we see in control decks, put them in a budget deck, and then build a shell around that, you know? How do we finish the game off without these super expensive cards? I think it's possible, so let me show you what I've got. Control decks work off of a few basic tenets, you know, remove things both from play and from their hand, counter spells that they're trying to play, draw some cards in the process, and then drop a big threat at the end of the game to finish things off. We can still pull this off on a budget, and I want to go through each different tenet I've just mentioned in order here. So let's start with removal and show you what we're doing in that area. First of all, we're going to play 4 copies of Grasp of Darkness, 2 Ultimate Price, and 2 Ruinous Path as far as spot removal goes here. Grasp is one of the strongest pieces of removal in the format, and a lot of decks, well, I say creatures, are evaluated on whether or not they can survive a Grasp of Darkness. That's how good Grasp is. We'll play all 4 copies. Ultimate Price is a little bit more narrow than Grasp, but when it can target a creature, it's better than Grasp of Darkness. Just get that guy out of here, no questions asked is always great. And there's a lot of very important targets in the format for Ultimate Price. We're playing the Ruinous Path because we see a lot of Planeswalkers in this format right now. A lot of the better cards are, in fact, Planeswalkers, and a lot of decks play them. So Ruinous Path is great against them. We need some sort of protection against walkers, and can also kill problem creatures, obviously. In the later game, can be a creature for us, which we're not really running too many of, and can, you know, in a way, be a win condition for us. Pretty big creature when you can get the Awaken off of it, too. So Ruinous Path does an awful lot of things, but the biggest thing it does is kill Planeswalkers. We need to be able to do that in the main deck. We're also going to play 3 copies of Languish in the main deck. That is the most expensive main deck card that I'll ask you to play here. Just nothing beats Languish, and if you have an extra copy, play the playset and go all in on Languish. Really, really good card in the format right here. We see a lot of creature-based decks, and a tokens-based deck just won the Pro Tour. So Languish, more important every single day, and a lot of decks already playing the full 4 of copies. For budgetary concerns, again, just the 3, but if you have 4, by all means, play them. Another basic tenet of a lot of control decks is some form of hand disruption. In Modern, you play Inquisition of Kozilek. In last year's Standard, you played Thoughtseize. And in this year's Standard, you can still play Duress. We're going to play Duress and also Transgress the Mind. Duress at a 2 of, and Transgress at a 3 of. Duress is especially good right now because there's a lot of non-creature spells that people are playing. You know, there's things like Seasons Pass, there's Planeswalkers, there's Collected Company, there's Pyromancer's Goggles, just a bunch of stuff in the format right now that people are using that aren't necessarily creatures. So, especially another way of getting rid of Planeswalkers. Same thing with Transgress the Mind. It can take out every Planeswalker in the format and a lot of different stuff. Creatures included this time, which can be really important because it can get rid of things like Kalidas or Archangel Avacyn, you know, lots and lots of stuff. Transgress is just really one of the best cards in the format, if you ask me. So, as far as hand destruction goes, it's important too, this is the main thing to remember, that we can get rid of things that aren't necessarily creatures. You know, you got a lot of ways of spot removing creatures and even sweeping creatures in the deck. But when it comes to things like artifacts, planeswalkers, enchantments, we don't have as much protection against them. So, we need to play some cards that help, and these are definitely the best way of doing that. Another basic tenet of most control decks is Countermagic. We have to have some form of permission-based spell casting in this deck, and what I think I'm going to go with here is 2 copies of Spell Shrivel and 1 copy of Void Shatter. Ostensibly the same, but Void Shatter is just definitely, no matter what, stop that spell. I don't care what you're playing. I don't care if you're playing Cryptolith right. I don't care if you're playing Ramp. Just stop that spell. Spell Shrivel will do the job most of the time, and it only costs the 1 colored mana, which is important. But Void Shatter will do the job every time, so I'm going to play some mixture of those. But overall, in this current standard, you don't have to play too much main deck counter magic. We've just got all the onboard and removal and hand destruction we could ever need. Something else you see in basically every control deck is a way of card selecting or card advantage, you know, some form of card draw one way or the other. I'm going to accomplish that with a play set of Anticipate in this deck. Anticipate is just one of the better cards in the format when it comes to card selection in these colors. We could play Read the Bones. I'm just not crazy about the damage. Usually I don't care, but we've really got to keep our life total up in this deck because we don't have the bigger, bombier stuff that's going to help us out in the mid game in these, you know, expensive control decks. So we've got to protect our life total as much as possible. So I'm just going to play Anticipate. We could also play, you know, Epiphany at the Drown Yard, Dragonlord's Prerogative. These would be good choices too. One of Prerogative makes sense, but I think we can get by on just 4 copies of Anticipate. I'm just going to play 1 creature in the main deck here and 1 creature in the deck at large, actually. And that's just 1 copy of Sphinx of the Final Word. Sphinx of the Final Word, super great against other control decks, which we may see a good bit of after Esper had a pretty good showing at the Pro Tour. So we'll probably be seeing control mirror matches, and this is a great card in the mirror right here. Also just good against most decks. It can't be spot removed. Definitely, it can't even be Languished, you know. They can try to sweep it, but they can't hit it with Languish. They can't hit it with a fresh Chandra. They have to have +1 their Chandra already. So this gets through a lot of stuff in the format and is just a huge power flying dude that can trade with other huge power flying dudes or just swing through for the win, you know. So love Sphinx, want to play at least the 1 copy. But what's special about our control deck? Well, what I'm doing here is I'm playing a Madness sub-theme, sort of, you know, and I think we get a lot of value out of it. In testing, I've liked 1 card in particular, but how do we get the madness going? You know, how do we start discarding cards to get the madness value? Well, we're going to play 3 copies of Sinister Concoction and 3 copies of Call the Bloodline. I have been very impressed with Call the Bloodline. Let me tell you, late in the game, I mean, I'm not going to play this turn 2. That's not when you play this. You play this after you've hit a Languish or established control of the board in some way or another, killed a couple of guys, taken the best threat out of their hand with either Duress or Transgress. Turn 4 or 5, you play your Call the Bloodline. Then you start discarding extra lands and such to it. Call the Bloodline can often just be a win condition if you're playing the game right, or if you're playing against the correct deck. Also, the lifelink on these creatures is very important. Again, protect our life total as much as possible. We don't have a lot of ways of gaining life back, although in this Madness suite we do have a couple of ways. Call the Bloodline is 1, and I'm telling you, once you get like 3 of these guys on the board, their PT starts mattering. The fact that you can split them up and either block with them or swing in for attacks, you know, all of this is important. The lifelink, incredibly important too. So, Call the Bloodline, not the most powerful card in the world, but I have been more impressed with it than I thought I would be by leaps and bounds. As far as Sinister Concoction goes, it's just removal. It's straight up unconditional removal that allows us to discard a card, and that's all I'm really worried about. This is a way that we don't protect our life total, but that just makes it to where I didn't want to play Read the Bones any even more, because I do want to play Sinister Concoction. I think in these colors, it's one of the better ways to get madness, because we just get to remove a creature. That's what all control decks want to do, and we get to get a big bomby madness card in there too. So let's check out what those madness cards are. Well, I'm going to play 1 copy of Welcome to the Fold and 3 whole copies of From Under the Floorboards here. This is the other card that I've been very, very impressed with. As far as Welcome to the Fold goes, it's really, really good, especially, there's one thing you need to remember about these Madness cards, is that if you can hit Madness on their turn, you can cast these cards at instant speed. So something like Welcome to the Fold can be great when they announce attacks. That can be good. It can be good at the end of their turn. Welcome to the Fold is great in just messing up combat situations for them, or if they swing too far in, just steal one of their guys, you know. Just stealing guys is really good. We saw that at the Pro Tour with Silumgar, who you could play if you had a couple of bucks. I'll go over some non-budget upgrades at the end of the video. But Welcome to the Fold has been fairly impressive, but not impressive to warrant a bunch of spots in the deck. You know, I just really like this as a very well-timed combat trick. As far as From Under the Floorboards goes, though, this is like a Sphinx's Revelation in some ways, you know. You don't get to draw a bunch of cards, but you do gain a bunch of life back, and you do get a bunch of zombies on the battlefield. Again, you can do this on their turn if you're able to get the madness off. on their turn sometime, and then you can basically, it doesn't matter that the zombies come to play tap, just do this at the end of their turn, and then immediately go and untap your zombies. That's great. Also decent in combat. It sucks that the zombies come to play tapped if you play it during their combat step, but you'll still gain all that life, which can be important, you know. Sinister Concoction, blow that guy away, gain 4 life and put 4 zombies onto the battlefield. Tap, yes, but that'll really help you survive a combat step one way or the other. Really, from under the floorboards is our main win condition as far as the playtesting has gone. Call the Bloodline can win the game for you. Sphinx is the Final Word can win the game for you. Hell, Ruinous Path can win the game for you. But from under the floorboards has won more games in testing, at least, than any other deck or any other card in the list, definitely. Even if you're just playing this for 5 mana, that's still 3 life, that's still 3 zombies, 6 power on the battlefield. So, not bad. And if you can pull off a big one, like one for 6 or 7, which is entirely possible, the deck goes very, very late into the game. We're talking turn 22. So, you can get off a huge one of these late game. Bernie Sanders, a huge one of these late game, and just completely wreck face. 26 lands in the deck, and yeah, you see there's just 2 Choked Estuary, 2 Sunken Hollow. You had a couple of bucks, again, easy upgrade, just do a 4 of each. Pretty easy, but overall this mana base works for us. I do want to play the Evolving Wilds. I just like Evolving Wilds, and there's really not much to talk about in the mana base, so that's why I'm like, Evolving Wilds is good, just play this. If you have more money, play more of these super special awesome rare lands. Here's our fairly important sideboard. Sideboard important for any control deck. Just, you know, streamline the removal. There's a few more copies of stuff that's already in the main deck. We've got more Duress in there. We've got more Ultimate Price, you know, the Transgress, you know. Disperse is in there. I do want to point that out. That is in there against, for an instant speed answer to Ormondal. And every deck needs that. This is at least a passable one. Flame Tendrils against the other, you know, big aggro decks in the format. It's a cheap way to play Languish as long as you're playing against cheap creatures. And then Rise from the Tides is just, I want Rise from the Tides in the deck. Look at all these spells. Look at all of them. You know, Rise from the Tides can be a really good late game. It's sort of like another copy of From Under. Here's your power rankings right here. Final score of 60, not bad, you know, right there in the middle of the road. Usually super budget decks are like a 55, you know, really competitive decks like a 66, 67 in that range. But this right middle of the road, and you know, for the price, that's about where you want to be. It's just about $50 to build this deck on TCG Player, and it can be super easily upgraded with a lot of really good cards. You know, you could play either Jace. Obviously, Jace Friend's Prodigy would work very well in this deck because we're playing Madness and he lets us loot, you know, draw and discard. And also, he'd let us recast things like From Under the Floorboards, which seems pretty nice too. Obnixilis would be a pretty good upgrade. You know, I just like a one of maybe Obnix in the main. And a lot of people probably already have one Obnix, so I could definitely see putting him in. He's a pretty decent card in here. You could always add a Languish. I fully suggest doing that. Of course, you put in more Choked Estuary or Sunken Hollow if you have those cards. And then other things are Dragonlord Silumgar and Kalidas, I think could both be pretty good cards in this deck. But again, probably just like a 1 of Silumgar, maybe a 2, but probably a 1 of, and like a 2 of Kalitas. I wouldn't go overboard with really any of these cards that I'm asking you to add, except for maybe Vryn's Prodigy. 3 or 4 of him seems pretty decent. That was a quick one. That's all I've got for now. I'm still going to do red-white mid-range. I'm working on green-red Cryptolithrite. I've mentioned that a couple of times. People did like the idea of doing Mill. People like the idea of doing Jund. Working on both of them. A lot of stuff in the lab right now. But in case there's anything I didn't mention just then, let me know what you want to see. I know a few people have mentioned green-white humans. I'm thinking about doing that. So, but if there's anything you want to see, let me know. If you enjoyed the content, hit the like button. That seems like the most sensible thing to do. Share the content if you think it deserves that kind of treatment. Comment, let me know how you felt about this deck. I think it's a good starting point, good building block. If you want to build blue-black control, you can just put this together and then sort of build on it as you get cards in this format. I know the Madness sub-theme looks weird, looks entirely weird, but has worked out fairly well. And I know there's other things that you could do if you had a couple of bucks, but that's if you have a couple of bucks. I think this is the cheapest way to build a workable blue-black control deck right now. You should also subscribe if you're new. I'm Dev from SBMTG, and as always, thanks for watching, my wizards.